Anil by Rijal Noor. This is another coming-of-age tale, like many of the other stories in the anthology, written from the perspective of a young man who lives in a village in Malaysia, just outside Singapore, in a small village where he encounters the horror of a murder in his community, which seems to be sanctioned and then covered up by that community, and begins to understand that he's living in a very violent and very deceptive adult world. And basically, by the end the story has seen his own attempts to bring the killers to justice being thwarted by the hierarchy of the village, and indeed may appear to be set to profit himself by being sent away for an education elsewhere. Okay, it's set in a remote village. Basically the boy gets up in the middle of the night, he needs to go to the toilet, he's frightened of going outside, his family's hut in the dark, looks out the window and hears a voice, and it's somebody calling Marimuthu, recognises this is the name of the village headman's brother, and as a man throws the rope over the branches of a large tree, which is actually very much a symbol of danger and almost horror. It's a symbol of frightening natural danger which Alan has already encountered, so it seems appropriate that this is the tree from which the woman is then hanged. She's actually still alive, although she is unconscious when she's hanged from the tree, and Anil basically sits and watches her die, unable to intervene. In the morning then, when both his parents have left, Anil goes outside, sees the noose still hanging from the tree, but the body has disappeared. Sees his parents and neighbours in a circle, pushes away through them, and sees that the woman's body is on the ground, being cradled by the headman's mother. The woman's husband is also there, wailing, and obviously Anil recognises him from the previous evening as Marimuthu, and he is in fact responsible for his wife's death. The headman announces that the woman must have committed suicide, quite conveniently, and says there is no need to report this to the authorities, and indeed the authorities do not figure at all in this story. There's no external investigation from local or regional police at all. It all seems to be dealt with within the community and hushed up very easily and conveniently by the headman. Anil tells Marimuthu and the headman that he knows that Marimuthu killed her. He actually does attempt to confront the murderer, but then the headman then talks to his father, Raghunathan, and Anil then goes to his house with his father, and there is a conversation between Anil's father and the headman. Later on in the story, Raghunathan then sees Anil off on a train. It tells him he will be very successful and he'll make his father proud that he's been sent away to be educated, but Anil does ask him, is he being sent away to school simply because he witnessed the murder? Anil's father is very evasive and says that someday he will understand, and then Anil vows that he will never forget what has happened. Meanwhile, while the train is departing, the story then cuts to back in the village where the woman's body has been burned, and Marimuthu is rather smug about the fact that he appears to have got away with murder. Okay, obviously one of the biggest themes in here is the central issue of Anil growing up, coming of age, and realising the rather horrific image of the grotesque tree does symbolise real danger in the adult world, and there's a real brutality and harshness, possibly from a quite misogynistic society as well, which is certainly implied by the way the woman is completely, well, not only murdered, but then completely removed from any sense of existence or any sense of justice within the community. It's as if she disappears, and the cover-up is such that nobody dares to talk about this or question it, other than a very disturbed 7-year-old boy who tries to do the right thing and again fails. He is old enough to understand what he's seen, and he innocently tells both the murderer and the headman. Grows up very, very quickly, and then at the end, of course, his further rites of passage is leaving his family again at a very early age to be sent away to school. There's a sense of family here as well. Two families, of course, are present in this story. There's Anil's family and the headman's. It could be seen that both the headsman and Anil's father are both bullies and do use violence and the threat of violence as a way of bringing their families into line. Certainly at the beginning we see that Anil's mother is asleep on the floor, and she clearly has bruises from a previous encounter with Anil's father. So, of course, any sense of justice and any sense of father's intervention in order to support his son is just simply not going to be forthcoming. There's a sense of power being abused here, because the headman has the greatest power in the village, and because he's at the top of the hierarchy, he sees himself as being above the law and able to make decisions which will affect the futures of everyone in the village. Anil's family and the rest of the village is obviously very poor, so there may be an implication here that they depend on the headman for employment, and therefore it's not just a question of the possible the possible social ramifications of Anil's attempt to tell the truth, but there could be some very real economic hardships visited upon the family. The men do seem to be quite violent bullies. It's not a positive representation of men in this story. Raghunathan obviously has been beating his wife, and Marimuthu kills his, and of course the dominant male character, the headman, obviously seems to condone both those activities and does nothing to create any sense of justice or balance within the community. And indeed there is no sense of justice or morality in this society, and it's just Anil who seems concerned by the fact that he's watched a crime being committed. The headman and his brother are too rich to be concerned about the right and wrong, while Anil's father is too poor. It does actually depict a village in Malaysia where people are following a traditional way of life, which is possibly outside the experience even of the people in the larger towns in Malaysia. Presumably the police or the government agencies are not really involved in the running of this village, or they don't seem to have any sort of influence. There doesn't seem to be any attempt to refer to them, to get them to intervene at all. The village is very poor, it seems. The people are living in huts that let in the rain, which we know from the description at the beginning, and dreaming of very simple things like a good harvest or having a new cow. So they're all on a very on a survival subsistence level, and that's where their interest lies. So anything obviously that's going to cause a disruption is quickly forgotten and put to one side so that it doesn't cause further problems. It's very much a world away from rural society in which Anil's been brought up and that he's going to at the end, that may possibly give him some of the support and the answers which he obviously needs. He's very typical of a 7-year-old boy whose life is changed because of what he sees. He's frightened by what he sees, which is a perfect normal response. He knows it's wrong and quite innocently tells the headman and tries to do the right thing. But at the end he doesn't want to leave home, but basically he has no choice, and there's an inference that he has been corrupted at the end because he is in fact set to profit from what he's seen. As far as the other characters are concerned, his mother, again a poor woman, she's seen as a victim as well of her husband's violence. She works for the headman, so it's quite a nepotistic kind of society. She doesn't seem to have any say in what happens to her son. There's no reference to the mother at the end. It's simply between father and son, and we do know that she's enduring domestic violence from her husband. And the husband, Raghunathan, or Appa as he's called, the father, is described as burly and as a bully in relation to his family. However, when he's dealing with a headman, he seems to be a bit of a mouse. So he's the headman's servant, does exactly what he's told. We don't know exactly how he comes to arrangement to send Anil away. Possibly the suspicion is that the alternative may be that if Anil isn't sent away, then in fact he may be disposed of too. But he tells his son it's a great opportunity and he'll be grateful for it. However, there is just one tiny shred of humanity in him at the end, that we do see him as a despairing man, and he's obviously genuinely upset to be losing his son. Marimuthu, however, the headman's brother who's committed the crime, does not seem to show any shred of remorse whatsoever, or any emotion, or any sort of acknowledgement of his crime. We don't know why he's murdered his wife. It may possibly be for economic reasons or reasons of convenience. There's no inference that she's done anything wrong particularly. The important thing is, of course, that he's allowed to get away with it by that society, and there is no retribution. And the headman seems to represent power and authority, but a very sort of corrupted form of power and authority. He allows his brother to get away with murdering his wife. We don't really know if he knew about that murder beforehand or had he hand in the planning of the murder, but basically his instincts are simply to cover up and to act out of loyalty to his brother, which I suppose could also be seen as very similar to the actions of Eveline in When the Wasp Drowned, whose instincts are to cover up and to protect her sister. As far as the form and structure are concerned, the narrative is told in third person, except for the two final paragraphs. It's seen through the eyes of Anil. It's divided into two sections. The long first section describes the events of the night of the murder and the following day, and then the second section reveals the outcome of Raghunathan's visit to the headman bungalow, and of course the departure of Anil from the village to an unknown future. And the opening of the story is very much like that of a folk tale or some kind of fairy tale, again very similar to When the Wasp Drowned. No, not When the Wasp Drowned, sorry, The Darkness Out There. Most of the writing is fairly simple, and there's a lot of short paragraphs as well throughout, so it's very short, factual, to the point. But there are a lot of descriptive details which give a sense of place and the kind of life that the villagers here seem to lead, which may give us some clues as to why this crime is allowed to be committed and doesn't go unpunished. Okay, there's a lot of irony, of course, in the final outcome here, because Anil is the only character who attempts to do the right thing, to tell the truth, to seek justice, and although he is rebuffed, he is then able to benefit from the crime, although obviously he has no desire to do that. So there is a real idea here that there's a sense of lost innocence of the character, that he's gone through a very painful rites of passage into adulthood. He's witnessed a murder which in itself is traumatic enough, and then he's excluded from his family for telling the truth and then sent away. So, he is obviously banished in a way from the village in case he should speak the truth. Definitely a strong sense of corruption. The whole village seems to be corrupt, from the top of the hierarchy to the powerless but very violent father figure. Even down to the tree and the mosquitoes, even the language that describes the tree and the mosquitoes, the terrorism, the reign of terrorism of the mosquitoes tends to suggest there is a sense of violence, underlying violence at least in society, and a brutality, so that in fact the actions in the village seem to be just regarded as a normal part of everyday life, although obviously as Western readers in particular were quite horrified by what we see and the awful experiences that Anil has to go through.